Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're diving into something that, might not seem all that exciting at first glance. Estate taxes.
Yeah, estate tax is not exactly, the most thrilling topic.
But stick with us.
Right.
It might actually be way more interesting than you think.
It can be, yeah.
Mhm.
There are definitely some surprising twists and turns when you start digging into this stuff.
Exactly. And we're going to be deep diving today into an article titled How the Estate Tax Exemption Can Be a Tax Stream Part 1 by Aaron Skloff.
Okay.
He's from the Skloff Financial Group, and it was published on October 1st of this year.
Right.
And that title alone kind of got me hooked.
Yeah.
Tax dream.
Tax dream, what does that even mean?
Right. I mean, when you think about taxes, dream isn't exactly the first word
Yeah.
that springs to mind.
No, not typically.
So I'm really curious to unpack this and see what he's talking about.
Yeah, me too. I think it's definitely worth exploring.
So to start off, maybe you could give us a quick rundown of what estate tax actually is.
Sure. So estate tax, it's basically a tax on the transfer of property after someone passes away.
Okay.
It's calculated based on the fair market value of all their assets, minus any debts they might have had.
Gotcha.
So it's not like your regular income tax. It only comes into play when someone dies and their assets are being passed on.
So you're not paying this every year like you do with income tax.
Right. It's a one-time thing.
Okay.
And this tax stream thing, it all comes down to the estate tax exemption. Basically, a certain amount of an estate can be passed on completely tax-free.
Interesting.
So only anything above that exemption amount would be subject to estate tax.
So it's like a shield protecting a certain portion of your estate from taxes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Now, Skloff also mentions this double tax dilemma.
Right.
What is that all about?
Basically, it's the idea that you've already paid taxes on the income you used to acquire these assets during your lifetime.
Right.
And then when you pass them on, you're potentially getting taxed on them again.
So it's like paying taxes twice on the same thing.
Exactly. And that's where the dilemma comes in. Some people see that as inherently unfair.
Yeah, I can see why that would be a point of contention.
It definitely sparks a lot of debate. Some argue that it's double taxation and totally unjust, while others say it's necessary for a fairer distribution of wealth.
That's a whole other can of worms we could open. But for now, let's stick to the tax stream aspect.
Okay, sounds good.
So tell me more about this exemption. How much can you actually shield from estate tax?
Well, for 2024, the estate tax exemption is pretty substantial.
Okay.
For single individuals, it's $13.61 million.
Wow.
And for married couples, it doubles to $27.22 million.
That's a lot of money. So if your estate is below that threshold, you're basically in the clear.
Yeah, essentially. That's why it's being called a dream scenario for those who fall under that limit.
So for the vast majority of people, estate tax isn't even something they need to worry about.
Right, for most people, it's not really a factor.
Okay, this is putting things into perspective. I think a lot of people assume estate taxes are only a concern for the ultra-wealthy, but it sounds like that's not necessarily true.
Not at all.
At least not with these current exemption amounts.
Right. Although, there is a bit of a catch we should probably mention.
Oh, there's always a catch, isn't there?
Well, this very generous exemption, it's not going to last forever.
Oh.
It's actually scheduled to change quite a bit in 2026.
Really?
Yeah, they're expecting it to decrease significantly.
Well, so this tax stream might have an expiration date.
It might. Yeah.
That sounds like something we definitely need to explore further.
Definitely.
But before we jump into that, I think it would be helpful to see how this all plays out in some real-world examples.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
To get a clearer picture of how these numbers actually work.
Absolutely.
Because right now it's all a bit theoretical.
Right.
So let's get into some specifics.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, so let's dive into some of these real-world examples and see how this all works in practice.
Sounds good.
Skloff provides a couple of scenarios in the article that I think are really helpful.
Yeah, I think those examples are great for illustrating, how this actually works.
Exactly.
With real numbers.
So the first example he gives is a single individual who passes away with a $15 million estate. Now, remembering that the exemption for a single person is $13.61 million in 2024. That would leave a taxable amount, right?
That's right, yeah. In this case, the taxable portion of the estate would be $1.39 million.
Okay, so even though the estate is $15 million, only $1.39 million is actually taxable.
Exactly, because of that exemption.
Right, because of that exemption.
Yeah.
Now, I know we talked about estate tax rates being progressive, What does that mean exactly?
So progressive tax rates just mean that different portions of the taxable amount are taxed at different rates.
Okay.
So think of it like a tiered cake. The bottom tier, the first portion of the taxable amount that's taxed at a lower rate, and then as you go up to the higher tiers, the tax rate increases.
So basically, someone with a larger taxable estate would end up paying a higher percentage of tax on those higher portions of their estate.
Exactly.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So in this example, with the $1.39 million taxable estate, how much would this individual actually owe in estate taxes?
So even though 1.39 million sounds like a lot, the actual estate tax in this scenario would only be $501,800.
Wow, that's way less than I would have guessed.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, considering the total estate is $15 million.
Right.
That seems pretty manageable.
It is, and that's exactly why SCLOF is calling this a tax stream.
Yeah.
That exemption really does a lot of the work here.
It does. It shields most of the estate from taxes, and even when you go over the exemption, the tax burden is still relatively small.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So in this case, the heirs would still receive almost $14.5 million after taxes.
Right.
Okay, that's a pretty compelling example.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about married couples?
So for married couples...
Schroff provides a scenario for that as well, right?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
The article presents a case with a married couple who passes away with a $30 million estate.
Okay, so $30 million estate, and the exemption for married couples in 2024 is $27.22 million.
Yes.
That leaves a taxable estate of $2.78 million.
You got it.
Okay.
And even though that taxable amount is higher than in the single-person example,
Right.
the total estate tax for the couple is only $1,057,800.
So even with a much larger estate, the estate tax is still pretty manageable.
Yes, and that's because of that substantial exemption.
Right.
That's the key takeaway here.
Okay.
The current estate tax system, with those generous exemptions, it's really not the burden that people think it is.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty favorable for most people.
This has definitely been eye-opening
Yeah.
to see the tax dream side of estate taxes.
For sure.
But I know there are changes coming in 2026,
Right.
and I'm curious to see how that might shift things.
Yeah, those changes could have a big impact on how people approach estate planning in the future.
Okay, so let's dive into that next.
Okay.
I think it's time to explore what this looming shift means for all of us.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so we've seen how this estate tax exemption can really shake things up.
Yeah.
Making estate taxes a total non-issue for most folks right now.
Right.
But you mentioned that there are some changes coming down the pike in 2026.
Yes.
What's happening, and what does it mean for everyone listening?
So as it stands right now, the estate tax exemption is scheduled to be reduced significantly in 2026.
Oh, okay, so this tax dream might not be so dreamy in the future.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
How much of a reduction are we talking about?
Well, current projections suggest that the exemption could be cut almost in half, which would mean the estate tax would suddenly become relevant for a much larger group of people.
So folks out there who are thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me, I'm not a millionaire. This change in 2026 could really change the game.
Yeah, it could bring estate planning into the picture for a lot more people than they realize.
Exactly. It's not just for the super rich anymore.
Right.
So what can people do to prepare for this shift?
Well,
Should we all be scrambling to find financial advisors?
while talking to a qualified financial advisor is always a good idea,
Yeah.
there are some things you can do on your own to get started.
Right.
Like, take a look at your current assets and think about how they might grow over the next few years.
Okay.
Things like real estate appreciation, how your investments are doing, any inheritances you might be expecting.
So basically get a clear picture of where you stand financially now
Exactly.
and where you might be headed in the future.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And once you have a better grasp on that, you can start looking into different estate planning strategies that might make sense for you.
Okay, so are there any specific strategies that you can share, or is that something that's better left to the pros?
Well, specific strategies will always depend on your individual situation,
Right.
but some common approaches include things like gifting assets during your lifetime,
Okay.
setting up trusts, making sure your beneficiary designations are all up to date.
Okay, so even if the nitty-gritty details of estate planning require a professional basis, there are still things people can do now to get a head start.
Absolutely. It's not about panicking. It's about being informed and prepared.
Right. Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
And in this case, understanding these upcoming changes can really help you make smart decisions about your financial future.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of estate taxes. We've gone from tax dream to potential changes on the horizon.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest takeaway here is that awareness and planning are key.
I think that's a great point.
Estate planning might not be the most exciting topic,
No.
but it's crucial for securing your financial well-being, both for yourself and for your loved ones.
Absolutely.
A huge thank you to Aaron Skloff for shedding light on this complex topic in his article, How the Estate Tax Exemption Can Be a Tax Dream Part 1.
Yes. Thank you, Aaron.
We'll include a link to the full article in our show notes for anyone who wants to learn more.
Great.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us.
Yes. Thank you.
We encourage you to stay curious, keep exploring, and maybe, most importantly, start thinking about those estate plans.
It's never too early.
Until next time, happy diving.